Hello, and welcome to another episode of Caddy Discusses. As always, I'm Emily, and today I'm joined by my colleague Nate. And we're going to be discussing the idea of tribal leadership, tribal knowledge. They sound kind of cool, but what shortcomings do these business philosophies have?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, so a few years ago, I think it was like 2020, when we were all kind of sitting in our caves, and the pandemic was there. We had a lot of time to study and research, and there's this interesting idea of tribal leadership. There's a book called Tribal Leadership that I happened to kind of peruse through. I think it was sitting on my bookshelf for a few years, and like, what is this about? And in this book, it was very interesting because I learned about two key concepts and a person I had never heard of before. So Ray Dalio, who was the CEO of Bridgewater, the popular hedge fund, and I heard of IDEO, IDEO, the design firm. So I had never heard of those companies, that person before. And the idea is like this: tribal leadership is a good thing if it's done the right way. And it kind of talks about the stages of a tribe or a group. So you have the stage one where it's destructive, then it's self-destructive, then it's I'm great or we're great, then it's life is great. So when life is great, you're at that kind of high level of ascendancy.
I see. So can you elaborate a little bit more on, I think especially people want to know, how do you get to that last stage? And what is it that kind of impedes you from feeling like life is great?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, kind of like when you're a child, you start off as in a me phase. You're very, very aligned with your own senses, what's important to you. You don't care about mommy or daddy, right? As you can become more mature, you have a better understanding of self-awareness and where you're at. And you start to look past yourself and say, these existential questions. And I think for an organization, that's very, very important. You have the two people sitting side by side in the startup. You have the group of 10 who have maybe had their first sale. And then when you're at 100 or 200, you're in a situation where, okay, now we've hit certain milestones. What are we really? It's not about the tactical, it's about the strategic. And it was fascinating to me because, Bridgewater was, or is, it's considered to be one of the best run organizations because of this idea of radical transparency. And they have this tribal kind of way of leading where everyone is interconnected. Now, here's a pitfall. How does that help with knowledge transfer? That's, I think, one of the big things.
Well, I really like this analogy too of when you're a little kid, you don't even have the awareness of other people's brains.
No,
right?
not at all.
Like you can't conceive that they are also a human being that knows things and critically doesn't know things. They just feel like extensions of yourself. And I think it's really easy when you're working in a company to fall into that same mindset.
Yeah.
Where you feel like, well, we were in the same meetings, we show up to the office at the same time. I'm sure that person knows everything that I know. And that's a very costly assumption, right? Like when you start running into problems where both of you are trying to estimate the cost of something and you're coming at it from totally different directions, but you assume you're on the same page until it's too late. And I think that's something where it's tough because it almost requires a certain amount of like vulnerability and exposure.
Yeah.
To be able to admit to yourself, like, I don't know something and maybe my colleagues do know, and we need to proactively transfer knowledge instead of just kind of assuming everything's all good, we're all in the same tribe, we've all come up together, we're always going to be on the same page. So I understand that, that's like a rough transition, I think, to establish that sort of culture.
100%. I like what you said. It's about vulnerability and it's about communication. So a lot of times when you've created a group, you do assume that all the knowledge is held equal, right? It is not. And let's say you're somewhere for a year, 2 years, 5 years, that knowledge compounds, right? It's almost exponential. And you start to revert sometimes as a person in an organization back to that base level state. Me, I'm important. So the only way for it to really work in a I hate to use the word tribal, but in a collective way is if knowledge is collective. So many times people talk about tacit knowledge or tribal knowledge. It is not collective knowledge. It is knowledge that a few members within the group actually have. So now you revert from life is great back to I'm great, and now I'm sitting here for 25 years, and I'm the guy who's sitting at the in the basement with all the answers, and you are the focal point, and you are really the linchpin. You're the bottleneck for actual transition.
That's huge. And that's something that we've encountered a lot, talking to customers and then just looking at the demographics of people within manufacturing. A lot of the senior leadership, the most experienced people, the people that have been there for decades and know the place inside out, they're retiring.
Yeah.
They're done. And I think for a long chunk of their careers, it kind of feels cool to be the person who knows.
Yes.
To be the oracle, to be the one that has the lore, on the back of their hand.
Yes.
But now they're facing this moment of crisis where it's like, what is going to happen to this company that I've helped grow for all these years once I'm personally gone? And that's when they're starting to realize, like, we need to collectivize this knowledge. It needs to be passed down to people in a way that's not just kind of scattershot advice here and there, not just responding to questions, but proactively.
Yeah. I spoke to a president of a manufacturing organization, I think last week, and he was saying, all certain kinds of orders pass through my desk for me to take a quick glance because I have a lot of information that the other team doesn't have that have been here for like 25 years. And even though I don't have to put an approval on it, I can catch a mistake before it happens. And I told the person, I'm like, well, I know you're the president, and I know there's probably higher value things you want to do. What happens if you have to do that? So back to this book, it says, I am not more important than the whole. And if you are that person, even if you're the president, the organization should be able to go without you. You should take a vacation. You should be able to say no sometimes. And you can't be an oracle. Because your organization is only going to grow at the rate of how fast information that you actually have.
I really like that. This idea of recontextualizing it as, it does probably feel very empowering to have the final say, to have that insight, but it is a bottleneck too. If every paper has to pass through this one person's desk, that's a major slowdown on papers passing through.
Yes.
We're also facing a world where all of these things are becoming all the more competitive, all the more compounded by external forces. And I just kind of feel like you need to be ready to admit that your experience, your veteranship might not be sufficient anymore either. If you've been stamping off on importing things from China for the last 30 years because that was the best deal and it moved efficiently, if you're relying solely on that expertise, suddenly you're going to be left without a plan B. If tariffs go into place, if things are getting turned back at the ports, what are you going to do? What's round two?
Yes. Yeah, what is round two? Round two.
Sorry, we're in the middle of recording.
So you mentioned round two. We don't know. And I think one of the ways to kind of improve the tribe, so to speak, or improve the group, is giving accessibility, giving empowerment, giving a roadmap to understanding. And it's not about removing the power from the person. I still want team members who have high level skills. I still want to empower people to be that difference maker, co-leaders. Everyone should be a co-leader. But what I also want to do is that when those key components move away, it's more of a network effect, and it is not like a hub and spoke model where we, the person, is at the center of every single decision, and the process becomes hyper dependent upon that person's ability. Obviously, we talk about growth mindset and all that. That's fine, but what happens when the changing tides come? What happens when you have to shift your strategy? Now that information that was so important either becomes irrelevant or it loses its contextuality.
This is very well put. I really like this, just kind of visualizing the structure, like the hub and spoke model. It does feel strong, it does feel robust, but you're right, without the hub, the thing falls apart before your eyes,
That's right.
If we're talking to manufacturers, that's 101 stuff.
That is, yeah.
But this more complex kind of crystalline matrix where everybody is able to advise everybody has their expertise sharing from just a robust system of knowledge. And I think that's something we can discuss. Obviously we work at Caddy, and this is something that we specialize in, is just making that knowledge so free flowing, so accessible, and so dynamic, that it kind of creates a new material structure for the organization. That I think, like, we use the term data lake sometimes. I don't know if on the sales side you guys use that term too often.
Yeah, we do.
But it's like, what can defeat a lake?
Nothing. It's ebbing and flowing. I mean, I'm not sure if you're a Star Trek fan, or if you follow Star Trek.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Star Trek. Yeah.
I used to watch Deep Space Nine.
Oh yeah.
Back in the day, and there is these beings called the. I think they're the founders. I think they're called. And then underneath them there was the Jim Hadar. I think the name was founders. Where they look like plastic, okay, and they were changelings, okay, and they had a solid form walking around on Deep Space Nine or in the spaceships, but their home world was nothing more than water, and it was them. It was just them becoming the fluid form, and they all intermingled on the planet. So all their consciousness was together. Their planet was just them in a liquid form. Imagine that. If we could share all the knowledge amongst everything that people have learned before in our organization, that fluidity, that planet of the organization will be so powerful.
All right, that's good advice for all of you out there. Be like the founders. Liquefy yourself. But no, I think it really is sort of an inspiring information ideal, to not think of information as something that only happens in conversations, something that's passed down in like a hierarchy, something that only lives in one format that some people might not know how to access, but something that's just in the air. It's just in the air, floating everywhere. That once you feel like I need to be informed on something, the information is readily available for you.
Man, wouldn't that be great? I wish that, I mean, who knows what's going to happen in 20, 30, 50 years, but that would be amazing. We just get information. We're almost there. We have the internet.
We're getting there.
It's the closest thing to it, right?
It's crazy how much it's advanced, even in our lifetimes, right? Like, remember when you had to go find the book on the shelf?
Yeah.
And page through and look at the index? And now we have, like, Alexa.
Or ChatGPT.
Yeah. And, I mean, going back to Star Trek, you think about the computer. They just asked the computer anywhere they were, any bridge. Computer, give me the readout on the planet we're orbiting. That's what we're headed for.
Let me get coffee at 23 degrees Celsius.
Oh. Beautiful.
Like an espresso machine.
Yeah.
On steroids, right?
The replicator. Now that's the dream.
Yes.
And that, I think, is sort of the vision of Caddy in the manufacturing space, right? Is it can be your computer, and just let the atmosphere of the information be around you wherever, no matter who you are.
That's true. That'll be great.
So yeah, let's look forward to that. Thank you so much for joining me, Nate. This is a great conversation. If you're enjoying these videos, please subscribe. We'll be putting them out probably every 2 weeks or so. And check out Caddy. We're not quite the Star Trek computer yet, but we're aiming for it.
We'll get there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Have a great day.